Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the West Coast Offensive. I am Kyle Dewhurst, and today I'm going to bring you a good show. Got a lot to talk about. We're going to start in our first segment focusing on the NBA. We got Portland looking for a head coach. We'll talk about who are the leading candidates right now to fill that job. Then we'll look at the playoffs as we are in the middle of it right now. Some very exciting games and series overall. So we'll break those down for you there. Then in our second segment, we'll look at the NFL. Specifically, we're going to talk Derek Carr. He made a comment and is making some headlines, but it shouldn't surprise no Raider fan. And we'll talk about what that story is and what he said later. And we're going to be seeing our forever guest, Drew Ager, in a pre-recorded AFC North division round. We're going to start that series this episode. And it's pre-recorded, so some things might be a little out of date. But I honestly looked at it and really nothing has changed much in the NFL. It's pretty slow, really slow news, honestly, in the NFL. Not much is breaking as we're in training camps and OTAs and all that good stuff. But let's head back to our first segment and talk about the Portland Trailblazers. All right, well, after 9 seasons, the Blazers have moved on from Terry Stotts, their coach. 8 out of the 9 seasons, they made it to the playoffs, won Western Conference Finals, but overall, nothing. They didn't get a finals, especially with Dame in his prime right now. It was something needed to change over there in Portland, and they are looking for that to be a new coach. Now, there's a couple different candidates. At one point, Dame said he wanted Jason Kidd, assistant for the Lakers right now. Kidd pretty quickly said, nah, I'm going to withdraw myself from that consideration. So that's one coach that Dame Lillard wanted, who does not want to be there right now. He's going to stick with the Lakers. That's Jason Kidd, who we're talking about. But there are some people right now that they are interviewing. So this is from NBA.com reporting. This article was posted a couple days ago, June 14th. Right now it's June 16th. So 2 days ago, but not much has changed in that department. Portland was interviewing current Nets assistant coach Mike D'Antoni, who also recently came from Houston. He was coaching the Houston Rockets. So apparently he's interviewing for that job, as well as they are looking at 2 other assistant coaches, specifically the Clippers, Chauncey Billups, and the Spurs, Becky Hammon. Honestly, Chauncey Billups and Becky Hammon both were former players, respectively, in the NBA and the WNBA. I really want to see Becky Hammon get a shot to coach, Shake it up. Let's get our first female coach. She was the first one to be acting coach when Greg Popovich got ejected from a game. She had to take over. He speaks highly of her. I mean, Popovich is one of those historic coaches, right? And, learning from him. She's been with him for 7 years. She has a great, what am I trying to say? She has a good record of playing in the game as well. Like, she was a solid player, and having a player as a coach, I think, works. I think it works in some scenarios, and I think learning from Popovich could work for her. And I would just love to see Portland be the first team to go all in. There's another team also apparently looking at her. Let's get the ball moving on this. I think women belong in sports. But what all this comes down, as much as I would love to see Becky Hammon get hired here, or even, I like, with my limited full scope knowledge of basketball and coaching, especially within basketball, I think Mike D'Antoni would make sense there too. But overall, it all comes down to, is Damian Lillard staying there? He posted a cryptic tweet after. He's definitely frustrated. He wants to win. He's tired of just being in the playoffs and not winning. Not getting to the finals at the least. It's different if you lose in the finals. At least you're getting there. They can't even make it. Their first round, second rounds, exits every year, and it's at some point something's got to give. So if he stays in Portland, the coach has to be a guy or a person, let's say, because Becky Hammon also is on this list of potential candidates. Whatever coach they have, whoever they are, they need to be someone that Lillard wants to work with and likes, and can help Lillard elevate his game and have the team work around him as well. Not around him as in, gotta be the Dame show all the time, but he needs a supporting cast that can help. I think we saw it in the series with Denver. Just once you shut down Dame, the supporting cast wasn't there for him. McCollum had off nights. Joseph Nurkic could not get going, and it was all on Dame. And some games, yeah, he can do it. Most games, though, he can't do it every single night. It's just not realistic, right, for a team to consistently rely on one single player, no matter how good they are. LeBron had a cast, Kobe had a cast, MJ had a cast. You need people around you that you can elevate and that they can also help your game as well. So you need a coach that can help that, a coach that can facilitate that and bring in people who are going to work towards that goal of, winning a championship ultimately, but also doing it in a way that elevates your star player, Dame Lillard. So ultimately, I think he's going to stay there unless, he's not going to be traded unless he asks for it. And right now, I think he'll give it one more year. If it's the same as this year, in the past couple seasons where they get into the playoffs, this season they barely got in. They were on the bubble for a little bit, and they had to win some close games at the end behind Lillard, taking over the games to get out of the play-in tournament, and then they didn't really do much in the playoffs. So they did nothing. They were a first-round exit, lost 4-2 series to Denver. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Dame. If he does get traded, that's going to shake up a lot. So it is something to watch there. Dame on the move, a lot of teams are instant contenders if he moves off the Portland Trailblazers. And Portland's a contender too if they bring someone in that's good. But you're thinking, there's people hopeful. I have a couple Raiders. I have a couple Laker fans on social media that I follow and I'm friends with. And there's been a couple, photoshopped edits of him in a Lakers jersey. I've seen Knicks would be interested in him. Warriors. Take your pick, honestly. Any contending team would love to have Lillard there on that team, right? And that instantly puts so many teams into a contender role or into a finals favorite pick. So it's going to be something to watch, because if he does end up getting traded, it's going to shake up whatever division and whatever conference he goes to potentially. So that's the stuff to look forward to. Ultimately, like I said before, I don't think he gets traded. I think he wants to win in Portland. I think he'll give it one more year. But again, if it happens again like it has the past couple years, I think next season will be his last in Portland for sure. Okay, for sure. But let's transition now to the teams that are in the playoffs, as we are in the middle of the playoffs right now. We're in the second round right now, and only one team has completed their series. One series has come to an end. I guess that's a better way to say it. With that being the Suns sweeping the Denver Nuggets. I like the Suns. They're my pick to go on to the finals, obviously, and I could see them winning it if they continue to play the way they are. But ultimately, this is more about Denver. What are they doing? They got MVP. It's just a disappointing end, right? They have the MVP of the league this year with Nikola Jokic. And of course, they did lose Jamal Murray, and I think we saw that in the playoffs as it drove on. We saw in the regular season they kind of got a little better, right? They were able to still keep scoring. They were attacking teams in a way that fit what they had going for them, even without Jamal Murray. But ultimately, when they hit the high-powered team of the Phoenix Suns, they got swept, and Jokic looked a little frustrated in a couple games, getting some interesting flagrant fouls late in the game. Clearly not happy with how this series ended. But hey, Phoenix is moving on. Like I said, they swept them, and I'm excited about that because I'm all on board with Phoenix this season. They've been having some fun over there. Then again, I pushed back this recording to talk about the Bucks and Nets because Game 5 happened last night. Normally I record on Tuesday, but I wanted to talk about Game 5 because this is a series I didn't think would be this way, We had 2-0. Brooklyn goes up 2-0, even behind the injury to James Harden, 46 seconds into the series. He goes out with that hamstring. And hey, Brooklyn still responded, went up 2-0. Then they go over to Milwaukee to play the next two games, and they now drop those two games, and the series is tied 2-2. 2-2. And then Game 5 last night in Brooklyn, and wow, Kevin Durant, historic performance. He had a career night last night, finishing with 49 points on 16 for 23 shooting to go along with 17 rebounds and 10 assists while playing 48 minutes to take the lead 3-2 over the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think this is almost the nail in the coffin for the Bucks. they just don't look like the same team. And for Kevin Durant, this is what I want to focus on. I don't really want to focus on the Bucks because they are what they are. I want to talk about the Nets because they're a team that when they brought in all these people, especially when the Harden trade went down, they instantly went up the finals favorites, and they've been plagued by injuries. The starting three of Harden, Durant, and Irving did not play together a lot in the regular season until they got in the playoffs. That was the first time they really got extended time, and they were still stuck with injuries. You know, Harden went down with this series 46 seconds into the series, and then Kyrie Irving was out is now out for the time being. So last night we did have Harden return, but he didn't do much. He played 46 minutes, but it was the Kevin Durant show, and Kevin Durant is proving the type of player he is. He's right now is arguably the best player in the league right now, elevating this team past the Bucks. They were behind, down 16 at halftime, if I remember correctly, and he scores 20 of his points or more than 20 of his points, more than 20 of his 49 points in the fourth quarter to elevate them past the Bucks, who the game ended with a score of 114-108. So this was a game that just proves again that Kevin Durant is that player. He can elevate a team, right? And he's proving that. And this is something that's interesting to see as the playoffs go on. Will he be able to do that? And I think that makes this team so much more dangerous as Kyrie gets some time to rehab whatever's going on with him, as Harden gets his minutes dropped down to still make sure that hamstring is okay. And Durant can make sure this team can keep winning. You know, to get out of this Milwaukee series, I think this especially if they win it all, if they win the finals, like this performance that we saw Tuesday night from Kevin Durant is a phenomenal performance that we'll remember for a while. It's going to cement him in that conversation of great players and great games with what we saw there, being down most of the game and coming back to win it just like that. Down, injury-ridden team. Interesting. So, and ultimately, you know, I think I said it earlier, but I think this is the nail in the coffin for the Bucks. Obviously, when you still have Giannis and Middleton there, they still can steal this. They still can come back and win this game and win the next game and the series overall. But to be up in the third, or to be up the way they were, and all of a sudden have Kevin Durant just dominate the game, I think that's going to be hard for Milwaukee to come back because, you know, PJ Tucker was being a little too physical in games 2 and 3. Then he has a shorter leash, and then Durant does this. So you go back to being physical, but then, you know, you spread out the ball. So it's interesting. I think this is going to put my pick of Brooklyn going forward. It's going to solidify that, and I think going forward now, yeah, Brooklyn is going to be the winner of this series. But man, Kevin Durant, great performance. Overall, I think if Brooklyn does win this series, I have questions about Milwaukee and what they do, because now they're in a similar position to Portland. I think you have a star, you have an MVP caliber player or a player that has won the MVP award, but you're not getting to the finals. You're not winning the finals. You're losing series to other teams that are better, you know? So what does that mean? So for Milwaukee, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? It's going to be all stuff to watch. So hopefully, yeah, we'll see. A lot of questions I think will be surrounding Milwaukee if they do lose this series, and I think they lose. I do think they lose the series, so we'll keep an eye on that. But let's look at the other games going on right now in the series. So far we're getting some close games. A lot of them are tied, or Brooklyn just went up 3-2 and such. So a lot of other games to be excited about. I mostly really care about the Suns and this Brooklyn series. So those are my two picks for the finals, is Brooklyn and Phoenix. We'll see if that continues. But next week we'll do another recap of the playoffs as they continue on, and as we learn who's going to get on to the next round of the playoffs. But that's going to conclude our first segment. When we come back, we're going to go to our second segment, talking about the NFL, and starting with Derek Carr. And welcome back, everybody. Segment number 2, we are talking Raiders. Now, this week, training camp started on Tuesday, and shortly after, we had the first time Carr has talked to media since the last game of the season that they lost to, So, first time talking, he made waves, but it went viral for a reason. I don't know why it did, because if anyone has been following the Raiders, and if you are a fan of the Raiders, You should know this already. And there are Carr haters out there, and maybe you're in denial of this, but everything that Carr has said up to this point supports what he said and went viral with. So let me read the quote. He's talking to this is on NFLnetwork.com or NFL.com per ESPN's Paul Gutierrez, quoting Carr saying, I'd probably quit football if I had to play for somebody else. I'm a Raider for my entire life. I'm going to root for one team for the rest of my life. It's the Raiders. So I feel that so strong in my heart. I don't need a perfect situation to make things right. I'd rather go down with the ship. You know what I'm saying? If I have to. Now, this is the quote. Like, if you know Derek Carr, and if you're a fan of the Raiders, or if you're a fan of him, or you just know him and watch him and heard an interview or two with him when he talks about the team, this shouldn't be a surprise. This is a guy that is day one was loyal to the team. Once he signed that, he was ready and on board. He went 0-10 and still gave it all in his rookie season and keeps giving it all, and you never hear him complain. Some people don't like that. Some people would want him to be that dynamic figure, that bully, that player that talks or whatnot. I don't think you need that, honestly. I kind of like that in a quarterback to just put in the work. Yeah, you've had one of the league's worst defense, at least the top 3 worst defense. One of those, at least top 5 worst defense in the NFL the past 3 years, and you keep getting blamed for it. Yet he doesn't complain about that. He just puts in the work and gives back to it, and wants to keep improving. So this shouldn't be a surprise. It went viral a little bit online. People saying like, oh, maybe Raiders don't want him around. He wants to be a Raider. He's going to be a Raider as long as they want him. And I don't see any reason why Gruden would move off of him. Even if Aaron Rodgers, even if Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson was a possibility, I don't think they would take that risk. And I do think it's a risk to move off of Carr because he's already in the system now for 3 years, going on 4. We have seen statistical improvement, and watching him play, you see him improve every single season under Gruden. Now that he has consistency, he's being more consistent. This is a guy who has had multiple head coaches, multiple offensive coordinators most of his career until Gruden brought some consistency. And that's Mark Davis saying, no, we're going to hire Gruden for 10 years because I want my buddy Gruden in the building. I want this guy that I love in the building. And we'll see if that works out long term. But currently, there's no reason it shouldn't. So when we hear Gruden and or Mike Mayock say, in whatever way they say it, that Carr's their guy, they're sticking like, oh, we love Carr. He's improved. He's an underrated quarterback. Whenever they say that, I do think they mean that, because I think he is an underrated quarterback. But at the same time, they're not going to move off of him right now. They're going to wait this season because one thing, he has 2 years left on his contract, where the money is all right. It's not horrible, but it's kind of a bargain in some ways. Definitely could be worse. And having someone like an Aaron Rodgers, a Russell Wilson, a Deshaun Watson, you would have to pay them potentially a lot more money than you are Carr right now. So obviously you wouldn't want that. Keep the lower money guy who is performing well and getting better. And also I think that Gruden would rather have a rookie quarterback come in, groom him from the start under Carr, and then move on from Carr when it's time, and then bring up this rookie quarterback that Gruden was able to groom and train and coach the way he sees a quarterback should be played in his system. So I think until the Raiders find a draft prospect that's in the perfect spot for them and they draft him, Carr's going to be the quarterback. He's still young. It's only his 7th season, and we see now what some players are able to do. We see Tom Brady is now going on 40 plus years, not in the league, but just age. It feels like he's been in the league for 40 plus years. But he's in his 40s and I don't know how old. He seems old, right? Seems old. Either way, he's kind of resetting the rules a little bit. So could Carr be a player that plays that long? Maybe that's something we start seeing as medicine and health and all that stuff kind of gets to a point in the world where being able to play a professional sport, a physical sport, especially at the quarterback position, which I think isn't as physical as other positions. Obviously, you're not getting hit consistently as much, hopefully. But if they can protect him, yeah, I think players in general, a lot of quarterbacks could be players that play for a long time if they keep their level of play high. This is I don't know where I'm going with this. I lost my train of thought. Let's cut to where I want to talk to now. All right, the last thing I want to do mention about Carr is I want to read this quote for him. They kind of asked him, like, hey, in this first media session, they're asking, why are you not a guy who's complains? You guys have had disappointing finishes the last couple seasons. You've made the playoffs once, but Carr was injured and didn't actually play. So he has never made it to the playoffs. He's never played in the playoffs. If you really look at the, Raiders, the defense is a huge reason why they're not winning some games, especially late in the season. It's the defense is a real issue right now, and it's hard to say they aren't winning because of offense or quarterback play when you have a defense that is so bad. It's hard to measure those two types of success and what is causing the losses over the other. So, they asked him, why haven't you been a little more compelled to complain? This is reading straight from it. Carr says, I'm that old school mentality. I'm playing for one team and that's it. Whether we won or not, I literally give every bit of energy and effort that I can to this organization. And when I sign a contract, I completely, in my mind, have to fulfill that. Yep, I'm committed to that. That's the last thing he says, and stuff about his family, but we don't care about that. Again, this just leads into the other quote he had of saying he's a Raider for life. It shouldn't come as a surprise. And this quote is saying I'm committed to this organization. I'm going to do everything I can to win. And I'm not going to complain because I can be better. That's essentially what he's saying. He's like, hey, you know what? We can, obviously, he knows the defense isn't good. He knows that, David Carr, analyst for NFL Network, they talk to his brother. They know they talk and they know the defense is not good. Okay. But what is it going to do to complain, right? As a quarterback, are you going to strap up and go on defense and do something? No. So you can't control it, honestly. And I like the idea that he's just committed and he's going to stick to what he can control and improve each and every season. And I think we've seen that happen. So ultimately, what I want to see is people to stop hating Carr. Or you cannot like him. You can say you want a different quarterback. You can say he's probably not going to be the guy that get you a Super Bowl. But there's no reason to slander the name of a guy who is loyal to the Raiders. All right, we have not had a consistent quarterback since, Plunkett. That's not true. I can't think of the last guy who was Gannon. That's totally blanked. Since Gannon in that Super Bowl run, it's been quarterback after quarterback. Jamarcus Russell was the one who was going to bring us back. First overall pick and was a bust. And then it's Jason Campbell, Bruce Gradkowski, Matt McGloin. These are starting quarterbacks at one point on the Raiders. And now for the past 7 years, going on 8, we've had Derek Carr. So to me, this is a clear, there's a clear thing here. Hey, Carr's the guy. He can win. We can get into the playoffs. Let us see him in the playoffs before we call for his head and say he can't win anything. Because the defense has been so bad and the coaching has been so inconsistent until the last couple of years. The offense has gotten better and better and better under Gruden while the defense stayed stagnant. Gus Bradley needs to do something, and I think he will. I think this defense seems to be fired up. Crosby and Ngakoue said a big praise. I'm going to put this quote in. Let me look it up so I get it right real quick. All right, I pulled this up. This is from Raiders Wire. This is Yannick Ngakoue, the pass rusher that they signed from free agency this year to help that defensive line and that defense as a whole. He says, I think Max, and referencing Max Crosby, the 3rd-round pick 2 years ago for the Raiders, I think that Max and myself are the best duo that is going to come hit the scene. I'm already putting that out there. He talks about how Max has a hard worker. He puts in that extra work. They push each other, kind of that competitiveness. They're feeding each other into it. And last year, Crosby was injured. He hit a metal plate in his arm all season, and he still got 7 sacks out of his lowered from his 10 his rookie season. And I think having someone like Ngakoue on the line too to pull some more pass protection that way will help Crosby, and that will also help Ngakoue. That'll help that interior line that we have too. It's just going to feed into each other. So, so when I hear, a player say that, that's some confidence right there. I don't know if it's going to be true. I can see it being true, and I can also see it being very wrong. And Yannick is a little washed up. He's been 3 teams the last couple 3 teams last year or last season, it's not good, right? Overall, I don't think it's going to matter, but it is a type of flag, right? Overall, I'm hoping this team will be good, but I think it really is up to Bradley, and I think we're seeing that tonal change within the defense. Just hearing these players talk as they're in training camp, they're excited. They like the direction this team is going, especially the defense is going. So I think that's going to help. So we got one more year, guys. Stop hating the Carr. Let him get into the playoffs. Let us see him have the game on the line where it's tied and it is up to him in a playoff situation to run the offense down the field. Not the offense gets the lead with a little under 2 minutes left, and then the defense collapses and Patrick Mahomes tosses a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce. Or the defense has a horrible penalty and grabs the face mask, Arden Key grabs the face mask of Fitzpatrick, and somehow he completes the pass and the Miami Dolphins go on to win the game. Like the defense has been so crucial in some of these losses where you can't blame the Raiders. They tied it or they got ahead with like less than a couple minutes to go, but the defense lets the other team score with a little time. So calm down. I think Gus Bradley's going to do good. This was about Derek Carr. Don't slander him. Give him a year. This guy is a Raider for life. Okay. He's okay. Stop hating him. I love him. All right. Anyways, moving on. I'm going to be putting in our next segment, the AFC North division roundup. This was recorded 2 weeks ago, but again, life got crazy with hospital visits. Everything's good. But hospital visits, just traveling, doing vacation, and that got all messed up. A lot happened. It's all good now. But we're going to start our AFC North. We're going to start a division roundup starting with the AFC North, breaking down those 4 teams, talking about what we expect for them, how we saw their off season, how it went, and ultimately how we think they're going to do in the regular season this next upcoming season. Our forever guest is going to be on that. It is pre-recorded, like I said multiple times. So if we say something that isn't topical, just ignore it. Just understand that was recorded a couple weeks ago. Again, I did a quick search. I didn't find anything huge that changed for either team that really would have changed my opinion, and I would assume that would be the same for Drew. But I am just rambling now. So when we come back, you will hear that segment. All right, welcome back, everybody. This week we start our off-season in review where we are going to be looking at the AFC North first. All right, Drew, this is a division that's tough. Obviously, ever since I've been watching football, it's been Ravens and Steelers going head-to-head. Bengals and Browns have been all right. Browns have been only good lately. Bengals have been good, and then they went back down. Now they got Burrow. They got Baker, and the Browns still just keep getting better and better. And this is a tough division. Raiders face all of them this season, which I'm excited for because these are tough teams and there's going to be great games. All right, Drew, starting with the Browns, how do you view their offseason?
I actually loved this offseason for the Browns, and I feel like that's not something that I have probably ever said, but they were able to identify the biggest weakness far and away on this team, which was their secondary, being able to add in a couple free agents like Mike Hilton, Troy Hill, the big one being John Johnson, bringing that safety over from the Rams, who's a signal a caller and a leader on that defense. And then being able to bring in a couple pass rushers too, like Malik Jackson, most notably Jadeveon Clowney. They really did kind of a 180 with that defense of what they were trying to do. Lost some, big run stoppers up front. But I think with the way that the NFL is evolving, I think their defense is, effectively brand new, like 9 new starters. Like it's going to be a very different defense. It's going to take them time to really get better. I think when you look at them in September, they're going to be a lot better in like November and December, right? So I'm actually really interested to see how that defense progresses and grows as a unit. But even looking at their draft class too, being able to bring in Owosu Koromoa from Notre Dame, being able to bring in Greg Newsome, the second great pick at the end of the first round there, defensive back. Really loved what they were able to do. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have weapons at every single skill position, including tight end, including multiple running backs, right? And Kevin Stefanski really showed how this offense can work and be super successful outside of a couple games. Baker played pretty well this year, and if they can keep his passing attempts down below 25, 24 attempts a game, you don't want Baker throwing 48 times. But if they can be a run first team and then have Baker go off to play action, this team can be very, very, very good. Some people have them as Super Bowl favorites. I still think that they're a year or two away. I think Baker can win a Super Bowl, but he's not going to be the guy that takes you there, right? I will say, I think the rest of this offense and this defense is so good that maybe they can carry Baker there. But he's not going to be the one he's not going to be the Andrew Luck dragging a team of scrubs into a conference championship game, right? So overall, really loved what they did. I think they are a better team than what they were last year, 11-5, which was only good for third in the AFC North last year. We are going to be adding an additional game. Vegas actually has them worse, though, which is a little bit surprising to me. Vegas normally has, or most books have had them about either 9.5 or 10 wins. I think there's a legitimate shot that they could have, 11 or 12, but it is going to be a tough schedule. It's going to be a very intense division. I think you could make the argument that all the teams in the division improved. So it's going to be, a very, very competitive time for the Cleveland Browns this year.
I mostly agree with everything you said, right? I like what they did in the draft, mainly the fact that they got Newsome for that back end while they lost a lot of different pieces, and they also brought in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, two players I would have been happy if the Raiders landed with, so I really do like these players, and the fact that Newsome would drop to them is awesome. Love what they did. They lost some big players, but they added them back in free agency in the draft. So I think this team is going to be better. I think I'm a little more hot on them than other people, especially within this division. My only thing is the thing with Odell Beckham Jr. Statistically, Baker and the team got better without Beckham. So I wonder if that's going to be the hindrance for them. I wonder if we even see Odell on the team come September. I don't think that's likely, but it wouldn't surprise me if another team was like, hey, well, we want a receiver, and the Browns are open to it.
Wait, you don't think
I don't know. What was it? I don't think
it's likely that he is traded.
I would say it's more likely that he's on the team, but it wouldn't surprise me if they traded him. Like, I think it's like a 51-49 split. It wouldn't surprise me if that's how. Internally, I think they're fine with him, but if a team comes knocking, I think they'll be happy to. They wouldn't hate it because they did find success without him too. Technically, they were a little better without Odell there. So it's one of those things that's the only thing I have about the Browns. And I'm like, which is, I don't know. Which is, hey, that's a different thing we've been talking about for the Browns in a while.
Well, and that's one of the big issues I have is just, I think that it wasn't just statistically. The whole offense looked significantly better without Odell Beckham there. It's a heavy offense. You have Jarvis Landry, who wants to catch 150 balls a season. You also have Austin Hooper. You have all these mouths that you have to feed. And I think that Baker clearly forced the ball to OBJ a couple times. And when he's just throwing to the open target, I think it was the same thing with Dak and Dez, right? Dak was a much better quarterback when Dez was off the field because he wasn't trying to force anything to him. Yeah. I completely agree with that. I think, though, because of his injury history, I don't think he's going to be traded before the season starts. I think maybe he could show some value and get moved at the middle of the season. But if Cleveland has a good record at that part of the trade deadline, week 8, week 9, like, would they move off of him at that time? I think that I'm not sure if Odell Beckham Jr. ever really wanted to be in Cleveland. It was reported that he really wanted to be a Patriot before that move happened there. So
that tells me everything.
I think
that tells me everything about the player. It's like, all right, whatever. Like, you're happy he could play, but he's just one of those guys that's just you're not going to build around him. You're not going to, because he's probably going to want to leave at some point soon. To chase.
Well, my biggest thing is I don't want to build around somebody that has that big of an injury history. Like, I don't care how good of a receiver you are. If you can only play 4 games a season, like, so what? Like, you have to be able to stay on the field, and he can't do that.
All right, moving on to our next team in the AFC North. We got the Cincinnati Bengals, who, Drew, They were fourth in the division. They did exactly what we said we didn't want them to do, which was, hey, protect Burrow, don't let him get hurt. And then he goes down with an injury because they didn't protect him. But he seems back. He's been rehabbing. He looks good, apparently. All signs point to him returning to form. And this offseason, they did a lot to help him. Drew, what do you see? What do you view in this offseason for the Bengals?
Yeah, overall, I really do like what the Bengals did. I thought that they were able to fill a lot of holes. I would have, like you said, Kyle, I still would have started Burrow last year, but I wanted to put him in so many, like 5 or 7 step drop back passes. I would have had the ball getting out of there, 2 seconds or less, do a lot of play action, run the ball effectively. Look, you only won 4 games and you tied a game with Philadelphia that you probably should have lost anyways, right? Like you weren't going to win the Super Bowl this year. So why not just protect Burrow as much as possible? And you don't put him into a situation where he's on pace to be sacked more than any quarterback in NFL history since David Carr, right? Like quarterbacks cannot just lose their, ability to start if they get hurt, but their confidence can be shaken. They can get happy feet. Like all those things are like very, very real, right?
We've seen it happen endlessly before. It happens all the time. So it's nothing new.
Yeah. So like looking specifically at their draft, right? Like I would have gone, with an offensive lineman in the first round. They end up going with Burrow's former teammate, the receiver, Jamar Chase. And they're still able to get, Jackson Carman in the second round, solid, offensive tackle prospect there. They brought in Riley Reif from Minnesota. He's a very good offensive tackle too. You did lose a lot of key players, which is interesting and as you mentioned this at the top, Kyle, like the Bengals have been like one of those teams that has, doesn't have a lot of roster changes throughout the years. And they're also a team that tends to not move around at the draft like at all. But guys like Giovanni Bernard, Geno Atkins, AJ Green, Carl Lawson, John Ross, they're finally, leaving. And it feels like, AJ Green and Geno Atkins, especially, it feels like they've been there for, like 2 decades, right?
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah, these like a life for Bengals. So I actually like that though, from, a culture standpoint and saying look, we're starting over. I was not impressed with Zach Taylor as a head coach. I'm hoping that they can turn this ship around. I do think that the Bengals, along with the Jacksonville Jaguars, are the 2 worst run franchises when you look from top to bottom. When you look at not just player personnel, but when you look at the support that the front office and the ownership gives the players, when you look at facilities, when you look at the hotels that they're staying at and the travel accommodations, right? Like there's a big difference between playing for the New York Giants and playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I do like that they improved their offensive line. Their defense is probably going to be terrible. Like that's one of the big things, like their pass defense, especially their offensive line, although they improved it, I'm still we'll some questions, but they're, offensive a lineup here. You're going to have Burrow, you're going to have Mixon, you're going to have T Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase. You have weapons. That's the one thing that Cincinnati has done a very good job of, is they have surrounded Joe Burrow with insane talent. So they're giving him every chance to succeed if that offensive line can hold up and protect him. And I think that's a big if. Right now, Vegas is projecting them as the over-under at about 6.5. I think that's probably fair, especially given that we're adding a week 17 to the schedule. I don't think anybody thinks that they're not going to be in last place in the AFC North. But I'm most excited. This team is exciting to me because of Joe Burrow, and that's all I kind of care about, right? Like, for instance, Trevor Lawrence makes Jacksonville watchable to me. Jacksonville was not watchable last year, right? Yeah, all of a sudden now Jacksonville is like must-watch TV. It's the same thing with Baker in Cleveland, right? So I love the fact that Burrow's here, because it gives me a reason to watch Bengals games. And hey, they were at least entertaining when Burrow was on the field.
I think we talked about it almost every week, at least saying, hey, he passes the eye test still until he went down. Like it did make us talk about that. So, and he performed well. So yeah, out of the Bengals, I'm looking for him to return to form. That's the big thing to me, is after that injury and being sacked so many times, can he shake it off and get back to where he needs to this offseason and next season? Looking at their schedule, They got the sixth strongest schedule based on last year's standings. That's not great for them in that division too. Uh, so yeah, they're not going to end up being. They're not going to push for a playoff spot unless Burrow really takes a leap with Jamar Chase as well. There, his old buddy. I don't think so though. I agree with the defense points that you made. Overall, what I take away from the draft is they have a plan. It was a very it seemed like they had a plan with what they wanted to do. Whether you agreed with it or not is another story, but at least from that point, I'm like, all right, they're building around Burrow in this way. They still address the offensive tackle position, but they also spent a lot on defense. So it just made sense to me. I don't think they're going to be tremendous yet, but hey, as long as Burrow can get back to form, this team is going to be making strides this season and every season on, hopefully, right?
One thing I just want to comment real fast too about strength of schedule. I always find it so interesting because like they're like the Saints are projected to be as good as they are this year based on what they did last year, where Drew Brees was their quarterback, right? Drew Brees is no longer the Saints quarterback. So all of a sudden the Saints become presumably a much easier opponent, but that hasn't been factored in yet
for sure,
when you look at strength of schedule. So that's just one of the things that I always find so interesting is because so many of these teams that we think are going to be great this year, like San Francisco last year, you thought would have been, a loss on your schedule. As soon as Kittle and Bosa and Garoppolo go down, all of a sudden that becomes a pretty easy W, right? So it's so interesting the way that these schedules shake up as the season goes on.
Oh yeah, you gotta take it with a grain of salt for sure. It's just funny that the Bucs still have one of the easiest schedules, but that's neither here nor there. And let's move on. Looking at our third team in the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who I'm not as hot on them. I honestly, I don't hate what they did this offseason, but I'm not sure what it means. So, Drew, how did you view the offseason for the Ravens?
Yeah, I think it's a tough thing, right? And I was using Lamar Jackson when we were talking before off the recording, thinking about Russell Westbrook, right? And setting the record for triple doubles. Russell Westbrook to me is a lot like Lamar Jackson, who I think can be absolutely dominant in the regular season, win the MVP, reset these records. But in the playoffs, is he the guy that I want to be able to lead my team to a victory when everything is on the line? And no, neither of those guys are the guys that I want. But looking at the regular season, I think Baltimore set up to have a great regular season overall. You do lose Orlando Brown, but you're able to take away from the Steelers Alejandro Villanueva, right? And he's definitely not as good, but I mentioned this when the Ravens first traded Orlando Brown. You have the most mobile quarterback possibly in NFL history. You need a left tackle, presumably least or less than every other team in the NFL. So, and then I think what we saw with their running game last year, how big of an impact losing Marshall Yanda was. So I think they're looking at this as we can kind of, spread out some of this talent. They bring in Sammy Watkins. They also draft Rashad Bateman, a receiver, in the first round. They gave Lamar a lot more talent around him from a receiver option, right? You already had Hollywood Brown there. They're giving Lamar every opportunity to be the guy, to be the passer, to be the quarterback of this team, to lead them to success. So I do really like that overall. I'm just not sure if he is that guy. I think they are going to dominate the regular season. I think Lamar's going to have an MVP caliber season statistically, but I don't know if that's going to translate into success once they get into the playoffs. Also, on the defensive side, I think this is where it concerns me a little bit. You did lose Ngakoue, who I don't think he's all that great, but losing Matt Judon, especially to a rival in the Patriots, I think is a big loss. Overall, though, John Harbaugh has done a tremendous job with this team. Defensively last year, they were second in yards allowed per game. they have some solid options here. Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle at tight end, J.K. Dobbins as at the running back. Vegas has their over under at 10.5 for the year. They're a team that I basically see the same thing that has happened the past 2 seasons. I think they're going to roll through December and then hit some speed bumps once they get into some really competitive cold weather games.
Yeah, my question for this team is the offense. I don't know what it is when I have seen their games. Yeah, they did win, and I'm pretty sure they were 11-5, second in the division last season. But for some reason, I just don't view them as that much of a threat anymore. And I don't know why. Yeah, their defense was good last year. Their offense was not horrible last year. They still had a pretty good team overall. But I don't know if it's because of this division and the other moves the team's made. For some reason, I just don't think this team's that hot. I really don't have any reason to. I can't.
I don't understand.
I can't
because,
pinpoint.
Like,
that's what
their
I'm saying.
roster's better this year.
Yeah, I can't pin. Well, that's the argument, right? Is it? I like bringing in. I mean, that's an opinion, right? Though, I like bringing in Watkins for that, and I just think maybe overall what I'm landing on is that this is the year Jackson has to prove that he can be the guy and win a game. Maybe that's where I'm standing. I'm just like, all right, cool. He's a quarterback. Like, I'm not one of the people saying he's a running back. No, he's a quarterback who's mobile. He's good, right? I like him as a player. Maybe it's just because of the Ravens' positions the last couple of years being overshadowed by multiple other teams, right? But to me, it may be just I think that's what my opinion is that this is the year that Baltimore needs to show that they can overcome something. I think maybe they had
Sure.
regular season, and maybe I'm echoing exactly what you said, and I just didn't realize what I was saying. Regular season, cool, you're good, but get there then. If they can't get there, I'm not into them
Get
anymore.
where?
Get to the playoffs, get a win, like show us something. I think they show us stuff, but they never actually they're always just short, and maybe that's not fair to put on the team. But overall, I think that's kind of where my opinion is on them. Is like, all right, cool, yeah. I mean, they're gonna be good, but does it mean anything? Does this actually make them better? I don't know. I'm a little off on them for some reason.
Yeah, well, and that's just what I'm kind of trying to key in on, because I'm not saying that they're going to win the Super Bowl. In fact, that was what I was trying to be very clear about. It's like I think they're probably still going to lose in the first or second round whenever they end up playing in the playoffs, right? But
Yeah.
do you not see them as a playoff team?
No, because I don't think Pittsburgh is as good as them, even though they had a better record. I think Pittsburgh's gonna slide. I don't know why I feel weird about them, and I can't pinpoint why, but I just feel off about this team, and I don't think it wouldn't surprise me if they're actually worse than last season. I don't know why. It's just a feeling. Overall, like I just aren't into what they're doing. There's not a lot of reasons behind it other than I think what it is the fact that year after year after year, they haven't done it, They haven't got there. They always been just close. And there's so many questions about Lamar Jackson. And I think it's just purely can he take over a game and do it? Because I don't think this team is going to.
But I think he's proven that he can do that in the regular season, right?
Yeah, so maybe it's only offseason or post offseason. Yeah, can you? It's only the postseason that I'm talking about. It's just what? Yeah, this team will dominate, sure, but if they're not gonna get past and win some games that are games that are tough, they lose the games that people expect them to, right? Win one of those games in the playoffs. I think mainly, I guess that's my focus is I want to see. I don't care what they do in the offseason. Show me something more than what you've done so far in the playoffs, and then I think I'll be a little hot on them. But cool, you're going to be a good regular season team. Overall, yeah, they made decent moves, but that's how I feel about them.
Yeah, I think on paper they got much better, especially offensively. So I'm just not seeing what you are, which is fine. But I mean, I think that they're going to be able to run away with a lot of this regular season without checking out too much of their schedule. I just think that they are such a balanced team. They have such a deep roster, and maybe losing Orlando Brown is a much bigger deal than I'm making that out to be. Maybe
Yeah,
Matt
could be.
Judon really, hurts the defensive side. But I think that with the way that the game's moving, to bring in the offensive skilled position talent that they did, along with Villanueva and Zeitler, like, yeah, I'm hot on them as a regular season team, either coming in, first or second in the division and making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I will say, to wrap them up and to move on to the next team, the Ravens have the second strength of schedule quote, which means nothing, but they do have the AFC West to go through as well, which is another tough division. So both of these divisions, West and North, are head to head, which I think will really define the playoff landscape. Is
I
how
think
those
you
two
and I
divisions.
might
Well, I
disagree
think
about
it.
how tough the AFC West is too.
Interesting. Yeah,
Considering you only had one playoff team and you had three teams with losing records, right? Or I guess the Raiders had a 500 record, or no,
yeah,
9-7, right?
yeah,
So
but they're tough. I mean, they beat both the Browns and I want to
sure,
say. Anyways, yeah, this is a
saying,
separate.
like with the AFC North where you have like three playoff teams compared to one. That was it.
Yeah, no, that's a separate thing. Anyways, but moving on to our fourth and final team in the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is a team that, I mean, I think they clearly overperformed last season. I think they went 11-0 for a little bit. That was just crazy. But then they really slid hard, and they still held on the first, but overall, I wasn't that into. This is another team. If both Pittsburgh and Baltimore, I feel, are gonna. I think people have them as overperforming this year. I think they're overrated a little bit. Pittsburgh, I see taking an immense slide. I'm still surprised that Ben Roethlisberger is there. It makes sense for the season, but I definitely think he's out starting next season. That's kind of how I view them. I think they're trying to win now because they realize what's happening and they're going to have to find a quarterback going forward. But Drew, how do you view this team, this offseason so far? For the
Yeah, I
Steelers?
think it was a bit of a rough offseason for them. I think that they're, similar to where I view Baltimore as, is that I think they're going to be a good regular season team, and they're limited once they get into the postseason, similar to what the Saints have been, right? With Drew Brees and just his ability to stay healthy and push the ball down the field. Yeah, I mean, if I was Big Ben, I would have retired. I think that he is shot, especially once you get past 8 games. But I would also say there was nobody I don't think they would be able to get unless, they go all in on like an Aaron Rodgers type that would have given them a better shot to be competitive this season. I mean, what are you going to do? Bring in Andy Dalton or, Tim Tebow, Blake Bortles. So like, I'm okay with him running it back for this season. I did not love the draft pick of Najee Harris in the first round. I love Najee Harris. I think, and as a person, man, to do your draft night at the homeless shelter in San Francisco that you grew up in, to give back the way he has already, he's a phenomenal person. I just don't like taking running backs in the first round, especially when you probably could have got somebody, of equal or, slightly lesser value in the second. They really have had big issues with their offensive line. Last year, they were not good, and they still lost Villanueva. You lost Matt Feller. You lose Marquise Pouncey. In rushing yards per game last year, they were 32nd out of 32 teams, right? They are not good running the ball at all. You also lose James Conner. So like, yeah, Najee Harris maybe helps that like a small degree, but if you can't block for him, what does that actually mean? Their defense is still insanely talented. You did lose a couple, like depth pieces there, but they still have their core defensive presence intact, and that might be able to carry them, a bit here. Defense last year was third in points allowed, and third in yards allowed per game, and third in passing yards allowed a game. So like they were able to like defend that very well. This is such a stacked division. Even though you have phenomenal receiver play here with Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster, I think that Roethlisberger, specifically with that offensive line, really limits you on how far you're going to be able to go. So Vegas has them at 8.5. I think that that's pretty fair. I do love Mike Tomlin, and I think that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
for this division as well, is that I think John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin have an edge just when it comes to coaching. Kevin Stefanski looks to be amazing, right? But with only seeing 1 year, I still need to see a little bit more. I've seen a lot of head coaches have success, in a one season. So I want to see more of that long term.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I was going to say too. Like Mike Tomlin's still there, and he's still a pretty damn good coach, right? But overall, like, yeah, they lost more than they gained tremendously. Like, the thing that is gathering all this information for us only has one player edition, and they've lost like 9, 10. I'm not counting all of them, but they lost so many, and they didn't actually fill them in free agency. So yeah, you might have addressed it in the draft, but you lose James Conner, so then you take in your first round pick as a running back too. That doesn't make sense to me. It's like there's other players on the board that actually helped them with losing. I mean, Villanueva was after the draft, but they didn't have him. They didn't have Pouncey. They lost 3 of their offensive linemen who either starters or depth pieces, and they only drafted one or I guess they drafted a center and a tackle, but they're rookies. And are they actually going to be able to get you to improve in the running game after going 32nd? I don't know. I just don't think that they really did anything to make them better. They kind of it was almost like they were playing reaction instead of taking action on certain things. That's how I kind of view what they did this offseason. So yeah, they're going to be held back by Roethlisberger. It's almost like the Saints, but they're a little worse than the Saints in my opinion overall. But it's one of those things like, yeah, we'll see. They probably will be decent. They'll be competitive, but they only will go as far as Ben Roethlisberger will take them at this point, and I don't know how far that is. I'm not hopeful at all. So yeah, Vegas has them at 8. I wouldn't surprise if they're fighting for third place with the Bengals. That's kind of how I view this team right now. All right, well, now looking at the whole AFC North, Drew, let's give them some grades here. Out of the 4 teams at number 4, I'm going to put the Bengals there just because I don't know what we're going to get with Burrow and the offensive line and the defense. The defense is a huge red flag right now. It's just, is it going to be able to stop some people? So I'll put them at 4. But again, to me, it would not surprise me if the Steelers dropped down there and the Bengals took a leap. It really depends on the play of both teams. But I think both teams are trending in those opposite directions, with Bengals getting a little better and Steelers dropping down a little. Overall, I'll still put Bengals 4 just because they have a lot of work to do, right? And Steelers have a better roster as of right now.
I would agree that I think the Bengals got a little bit better, and I think the Pittsburgh got a little bit worse. But I don't think that there's an 8-game slide for those teams. So yeah, I mean, I think Cincinnati's 100% going to come in last place. I don't even think Zach Taylor is going to be the long-term answer at head coach there. So yeah, like I agree. I think Cincinnati will win a game or 2 more than what they won last year. I think the Pittsburgh will win, maybe even 3 or 4 games less than what they won last year. But yeah, I don't see an 8-game swing there. But I do think that Pittsburgh's defense is so good. I think that they are with the veteran leadership that they have. I think they can still get off to a hot start though. And I think that that's going to be the biggest thing for them. Is making sure that they can win the early games and making sure that they can win the games that they're supposed to win.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my 4 and 3, and I think it's the same for you, right? Yeah. All right. Let's look at number 2 then. I'm going to put Baltimore here. Again, they might be number 1 in the division, but I don't see them. And I guess the Browns didn't really do much in the playoffs either. But to me, and it's not even, so many people talk about the Ravens and say they are limited by Jackson. I don't necessarily think that, even though I'm kind of siding with that side saying that they're not going to overcome it. I think it's a team issue, right? I just don't know what this team is with Lamar Jackson. Is it going to be capable of getting to hub? Get in the playoffs. Show me that you can actually win games that you aren't supposed to win and win them well. But I'll have them at 2 overall. But again, I am not that hot on this team overall. Yeah, still a good team, but yeah.
Do you think that they're going to get a wild card spot though?
I think so. Yeah. Just
okay.
I still think they are capable. It's just, and then that's why I'm landing on the fact that I think it's just, sure, Regular season, great. You're awesome. You're a good, solid team. I don't care though if you're not going to perform well in the playoffs at this point. Like that's kind of where I'm landing with this team as a whole, which isn't fair to review it in, but that's kind of where I'm landing on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make the case that Baltimore might be less likely to have success in the playoffs than Cleveland. Maybe. I think that's kind of like a 50-50 split. Like Baker hasn't shown me that he can be an effective quarterback in the playoffs either, right? So like I still have those same questions.
Yeah, but I think it's it's not about quarterbacks fully, and I know I keep saying Jackson, but and that's why I want to make it's more of a team thing. To me, that's kind of it's just my impression of what I'm seeing. Which again, there's not really stats to base this off of, except the fact that they haven't won the games they aren't supposed to. Like, and it's like you're not gonna win then, and you're not gonna be successful if you can't win those games every now and then that you're not supposed to, and they haven't. So that's kind of where I land on them. And again, it's the quarterbacks haven't proven it yet, but it's the teams are trending in different directions. Same thing with Steelers and Bengals. I just think Baltimore's trending a little down, and so far Cleveland's trending up, in my opinion. I think they've got better this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm still not sure why you see Baltimore trending down though. Like I think that they definitely got better on paper this year. I'm really excited to see what Lamar Jackson does with 3 quality wide receivers for the first time in his career. I think that Baltimore is the fact that they're returning the vast majority of their defense, which is a good defense, compared to Cleveland, which is returning like a brand new defense, not returning, but I think Cleveland is going to get off to a slower start because of that, and that could effectively hurt them in the season overall. It is going to be interesting with the addition of the 17th game this year because these two teams were tied with their records last year. So if that 17th game would have made a huge impact there, I do think that these teams are going to be 1-2. I think whichever team doesn't win the division is still going to be a playoff team via the wild card. In both of them, I would probably expect to, win maybe one game in the playoffs, but probably lose the second game. But I find your opinions on Baltimore just so curious because I really view the team differently. I'm not expecting them to win the Super Bowl this year. I have major questions about Lamar Jackson's ability to get over the hump, the same way with, Michael Vick, right? The same way with Allen Iverson, like these phenomenal athletes that don't necessarily fit into systems tremendously well. But I think when you look up and down that roster, if I was a Baltimore Ravens fan, I would be much more excited going into this season about what the possibilities are ahead.
Yeah, man, for some reason, I just don't think it could trend either way. They sure on paper they got better. I don't think it's going to happen though. That's just what I'm calling right now for the Baltimore Ravens. They'll still make the playoffs, but I think they're going to sneak in somehow. I think Cleveland's going to take this division over. But that is going to wrap up our AFC North in review leading up to the NFL season. We'll be going over each and every division in the NFL, doing an offseason in review and predicting where they're going to land within the division leading up to the season start. Well, that is going to conclude another episode of the West Coast Offensive. I am your host, Kyle Dewhurst. As always, you can find and listen to our podcast on a collection of podcast services such as Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor.fm, our host, and of course, Apple Podcasts. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review. 5 stars helps us boost our ratings. It helps our visibility to be discovered so other people can catch the show. And it's just nice to see reviews. So if you want, please do it. I would really appreciate it. You can also stay up to date on the show by following our social media pages. We have a Facebook page, again, West Coast Offensive. Look it up, find that bear logo, and you're good to go. As well as on Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. Check out our YouTube channel, the West Coast Offensive as well. Be sure to like and be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to not miss out on any uploads, any clips we upload, or the video version of the podcast also will be uploaded there for you to watch if you want to see my face. Anyways, if you want to support the show, you could do so at buymeacoffee/the West Coast off, because you can't have a long URL. That's buymeacoffee.com/the West Coast off, where you can support creators by simply buying them a coffee. Super cool site. I really love them. Also, I love the premise of just buying me a coffee. You know, I've done it for a couple different programs that use it. It's so nice just to, I don't know, it changes the thought process of, oh, I'm giving someone money, to like, I'm going to support someone doing their show by giving them a cup of coffee. You know, like when you ask them, hey, let's go get some coffee, and then you buy it for them. It's the same idea, right? You know, and it just, that simple process in my mind of changing, like, oh yeah, like it's just $5, right? Anyway, so you could, if you wish to support the show, I super appreciate it. But you can go again, buymeacoffee.com/the West Coast off. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you again all for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Be sure to follow on all the socials to stay up to date and interact with myself as it comes across. I'm active on Twitter. You can catch me on Twitter at KyleTheFish30, or you can, again, catch this West Coast Offensive Twitter at West Coast Offensive, and we can have some fun on there. Anyways, enjoy the week. Remember, stay kind, be safe, spread some joy. See you next time.